just a boob. I'm a full boob. Yeah. All right.
Okay, you good?
Yeah.
Here we go on three.
Yep.
1, 2, 3. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of True Crime and Cocktails. We're so glad that you're here. As always, I am your host, Lauren Ash, and as always, I am joined by my co-hostess with the mostess, Christy Oxborrow. How you feeling?
Feeling great.
Beauty.
The weather is becoming nice. It's turning
Hey.
into that like summer feel.
Sure.
It's great.
I do know. It's been nice here too. Up and down, but overall nice. And look, any break from the rains
Yeah.
of Southern California that we've had this past year, is welcomed by me. Now listen, I gotta fess up with you about something.
Uh-oh.
I've done something, and I'm not proud of it.
Oh. Okay. Okay.
I have committed an adultery.
Oh no.
I cheated on our collective boyfriend, McDonald's. And
Oh no.
I know. I know. I was craving an Impossible Burger because as the listeners may not know, I was a vegetarian for 9 years. I still, dabble in the meat free from time to time.
Of course.
And I know you can get them at Burger King.
Sure.
And so we went. And look, here's the thing. I don't like to comment on prices. I feel like, I'm a blessed human. I don't want to complain about things being expensive, but I have to say something, and I mean it.
Okay.
We ordered one Impossible Burger meal and one additional Impossible Burger, and it was, I believe, over $30.
Wait.
American.
Wait. 2 meals or just literally the meal and one sandwich?
That's it.
Over $30?
It was over 14 for the combo, and it was 10 for the second burger. And then we added
What?
cheese, and then we added cheese. And then by the time you add the tax or whatever, I think it was either just over or sitting at like $30.
This is why Burger King considers himself a king.
Well, thank you very much, because I feel like a pauper after this visit. But listen,
That's insane.
I had to do some quick Googling because I was like, have I just not been paying attention? But according to Google 2024 pricing, the Big Mac in California is sitting around $5, just the sandwich. And the Whopper, because I was like, look, I understand we're getting the Impossible Burger. Maybe it's a little more expensive because the vegetarian situation. Maybe that's what it is.
Sure.
But the Whopper is $7.
Huh.
Yeah. And when you're doing $7 for the sandwich, I mean, I was thinking about it and I was like, $30, where are teens going on dates? $30 for dinner for 2 people? Good Lord. If we'd both had the combo, we would have been in the 35 range.
Well, now I wish I paid attention earlier because we had so many things going on. We had Wendy's today. I may as well keep because I guess
we both had an affair.
Yeah, you were just quicker to be willing to tell people.
Of course.
I was hiding in my shame. No, I'll do anything for their strawberry lemonade. And they know it, those good people at Wendy's. But we grabbed Wendy's, and I wish I'd paid more attention to what the cost was in the end. But usually, like for the 5 of us to get food at McDonald's, easily $50 to $60.
Yeah.
Easily. But again, that's for 5 people.
Yeah. You're averaging about $10 a piece.
Yeah. So for 2 people, that feels.
And these are US prices. This is the other thing. You're talking Canadian.
Yeah.
$50 Canadian is going to be.
Oh, this is like time zone math.
Why am I trying to do conversion?
Yeah, time zone math and
silly.
currency conversion are not our bag.
Yeah. 60 Canadian in US dollars, let's do that, is $43 US dollars. So,
Okay.
for context, my, my 30 US in Canadian,
Yes.
$41.
Oh, no,
No. And
no.
listen, I also wanna say this, I'm not trying to slag the brand completely. I enjoy the Impossible Whopper. It's a solid
Sure.
sandwich.
Hey.
You know what I'm saying? But do I think that that's a little bit cuckoo bananas? I do. I do think that's
Oh,
cuckoo bananas.
I think, Mr. King is like a little inflated with the ego if he's upping his prices.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna say that's an insane price, which is a coming from a woman who hours ago today spent roughly $106 on plush birds. It's bigger than me. Look, do I like birds? No, they're not for me. The point was, I have a child who birds are their favorite animal, and they're going in a prize box, and it just is what it is.
Yeah.
It was just it. I mean, it was the joke of me telling my husband, like, "Hey, while we're in town, I need to go get that. I need to make a stop at this store." He's like, "Great." I'm like, "I've never been in there before," and we walk in, and it's overwhelming and intense. And then I was like, "Okay, great." And I find the section, I find the spot, and there's so many to pick from, and I just make a basket out of my arm, and I just start loading them into my arm, and he's like, "What are we?" He's like, "Are you aware of how much these cost?" And I went, "Yep." They were like 10 or $13 a piece, and when you press them, they make a bird noise.
Right.
Not any bird noise. They're like, if I may, kind of hoity-toity birds because they are very specific. Like, it's not just like, there's a red bird. It's, this is a such and such cardinal, and when you squeeze it, it makes the sound that that specific cardinal actually makes. So
Wow.
I ended up buying multiple of these birds, um, and they all make the tweets are all different, drive the cats nuts. They can't handle it. They don't like it in our home. They don't know what to do with about it. But, yeah, as someone who paid an insane amount of money for plush birds, $40, for not even 2 complete meals, get out.
Get out.
Get out. That's
Have you
insane.
heard about the Wendy's scandal?
Oh, no.
So, announcement is made that they're gonna start employing dynamic pricing. What is that? Surge
Okay.
pricing. So if it gets busy, then they can up the prices, charge you more because it's
Hmm.
busy. However, you're gonna love this. Whoever, some CEO for the brand came forward and was like, "That's not what we meant. We didn't mean we would raise the prices at times. We meant that it would be possible if it was a slow period to lower the prices." Which I love. It's and I'm like, "You do realize you're saying the same thing though, right, bud? Like, you like, come on. Like, well, if we realize
Yeah.
it's a slow time, then we can offer a sale." Okay, but the point is that you could still just charge that sale price anytime.
Yeah.
You're not fooling us with your verbiage, Mr. Wendy. Dave Thomas
Now,
is turning in his damn grave. You know what I mean?
thank you so much. Now, did somebody point out to these CEOs who are like, "Oh my god, if it's busier, charge more." Did anyone point out that the employees should then at that point be paid more?
Great question. But they're saying that's not what we meant. So by that stretch, they could then say, well, I guess if it was slower, then we could lower their pay for those slower
Oh
hours.
god. You know, I'm just so sick of the gougers.
Thank you.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
you've got enough money,
Yep.
sit down, take a fucking nap,
Take a nap.
and leave the rest of us alone.
Go to the country and buy some jams.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yes. It's just unnecessary, and it's always, like, the insanely rich people who are like, "Oof,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I don't wanna do it, but we're gonna have to raise prices because I don't know. It's like, get out of town.
But then
They're
when a
only
small
doing that for
business
more
is
money.
charging a rate for an item that's, like, handcrafted, people lose
Yeah.
their minds, and it's like,
Oh, yeah.
you have no idea. I watched this woman on Instagram. It was a suggested post. I have no idea who this person is, but she made a purse by hand. She made this entire very cool purse by hand, and I was watching it and I was like, "This took this woman days,
Yeah,
days to make it." And then I was like, "I wonder how much she charges." And guess what? Probably not enough. I forgot to
sure.
check. That's the truth. But I ADHD'd. But the point is like, yeah, that's my immediate thought was whatever she's charging, she ain't getting paid enough because that was like 4 days of her life. You would need basically like a week of pay on one purse. And then I was like, how do you then you can't mass produce these.
Nope. And then as I bet there were she posted probably a price, and I bet there were so many comments
Yep.
of, "Well, I can get that for cheaper on Amazon."
Right. And
And
it's
it's
like,
like,
well,
"Then
it's
do it."
not handmade, it might be handmade, but not in a ethical way.
Yeah.
Um, but then I remember her caption was something like really cut some corners with this one. And I was like, dear God, how long does this woman's purses normally take to make? God bless. Like, what a
Oh,
wonderful
yeah.
commitment to artistry and artisanery. Artisanery?
Artisanery, that's I would eat there, but that would charge $40 a burger, I think.
Look, at
Yeah.
artisanery, you can get a full meal for your whole family and not get gouged like some of the other guys.
Hey. Yeah, it's insane. I don't know how the small business does it,
No,
because I'll say
no.
it, there was that brief moment of time which you, easily remember, where I would, like, paint and craft things and go to, like, various trade shows, and just the amount of people like, there was one woman who will stick in my brain for life. I had painted this little picture of Olaf that I thought was very cute, and this little girl, probably, like, 6-ish, she comes by, she sees it. It's the whole reason I went with Olaf because Frozen was massive at the time, so I'm like, "Get the Olafs, it gets the kids in, whatever."
Yeah.
So she comes past, the girl makes eye contact with the little Olaf, and she was like, "This I want. This is adorable. I love this. I want this. I want this." And her mother looks at it and goes, "Ugh, I can paint that." And like grabs the child's arm and pulls her away. But guess who came back to my table moments later with a $10 bill to buy that goddamn painting, which I was charging way too less. You know what I meant. It was my prices were incredibly low because I was paranoid that I was like, "Oh, people are right. They're not gonna buy this if it's too expensive." And it's like, but it took me hours to do,
Yeah.
and I made 5 or $10 off of it.
Right.
And so if it takes me more than an hour, it's like at 5 or $10, that wasn't worth my time,
No.
which is why I mentally broke and stopped doing it.
Yeah.
'Cause it's not. At some point, you've just gotta be like, "I can't." And I couldn't stand the trade shows anymore, not after, like, "Ugh, I can do that."
And here's the thing. Could she?
I
Probably not.
I
Second of
assume not.
all, she doesn't have the time.
No.
She's got a precocious little child here who's running around fingering things, you know what I mean? She's showing her what she wants, what she
Mhm,
needs, all of the
mhm.
above. Take a load off, ma. Buy
But
the gift. I mean,
I
again, she did. She
yeah.
did.
What I like is that it took that child just minutes to wear her down,
Yeah.
to being like, and who knows where that photo is today? Like, where that is does that child still have it? Who knows? Did she donate it somewhere? Give it to a friend? Who knows?
What I wanna believe, though, is that the
Yeah.
woman went, "I could paint that," and then this was her internal monologue as she walked away. "Why did I say that? I have absolutely no artistic ability. Why would I say that? That was so impossibly rude. Even if I did have the artistic ability, I don't have the time, and if I did have the time, I don't wanna spend it painting this thing for my child. It's worth the money. In fact, it's worth double the money. This woman should be charging more for her wares."
Thank you. Thank you so much. It is a dream now to think that that woman, referred to my, table of items as wares.
Well, they were.
I
They damn well were.
They were, but I'll say it, exhausting. There's
Yeah,
a
it's too
reason.
much.
The downside is I do have 4, like, canvas containers in my storage room full of stuff
Mhm.
that it's like, What am I going to do with that? I don't know. The answer is I straight up don't know. But at some point, I'm going to have to do something with it because we need the space. But that's later me's problem.
That's future you's
So
problem.
yeah, I've given future me a lot of problems that
Same.
current me is like living large, just doesn't care. She's living her best life. Future me is in trouble. Because
Listen, you want to talk
yeah.
about future you being in trouble? I am flying to Washington, D.C.
Oh my God.
tomorrow.
You haven't packed.
Tomorrow on a red eye overnight. Am I packed? No. I'm like, that's future me's problem. I have all day. But you know what else I have to do tomorrow? Everything under the fucking sun. I got to do everything tomorrow. Everything. So
I'm so sorry.
yeah, what have I done? What have I done?
See, right now you is kind of okay.
Yeah.
It's gonna be
Me at 9
tomorrow. You,
o'clock tomorrow morning, fucked. SOL. You know what I mean? Up shit
yeah,
creek, no paddle.
yeah, I get that. Uh, I have done a similar thing. Has nothing to do with flying, but I've done a similar thing to myself. Um, where I was like, "Oh, I've got all these things to do. It doesn't matter. I have to make sure this episode is ready for the record, and then everything I'll do after that." Well, congrats. We're recording it now, so tomorrow is my everything after. So I have a bunch of things I need to do because we moved our oldest home from university for the summer,
Ah.
and now all of his things are just in my home. Like,
Mhm.
as soon as you walk in, you're like, "Bah, there's a whole thing full of dishes. That's fun." And, "Oh, there's a mini fridge." Like, there's just things everywhere. And so I'm like, I need a space for it. And I was supposed to create that space for it prior to this, but I just didn't have time. So that's tomorrow. But now I have to make the space and then move that stuff into that space. And then I learned just hours ago at a child sporting event, we're leaving the building, and my middle son takes the shoes he was wearing, takes them off, and just kind of like tosses them on the floor and starts to walk away. And I went, "First of all, you're not in your home. Don't leave your shoes there." And he goes, "Oh, yeah." And he picks them up and he puts them on a rack near the front door. And I went, "What are we doing there? Why are you leaving your shoes there? You need them for school tomorrow. Don't be lazy. Haul ass back upstairs and go put them in your locker, in your class, and whatever. And then come on and we'll leave." And he goes, "Oh, I may as well leave them there. I have to be back here for practice tomorrow morning." And I went, "What are you going to tell me?" He's like, "Oh, did I not?" "No." "What time's your practice?" 7:30. I went, "Fuck off." It's like 7:30. So I'm like, so I'm recording tonight. My husband has a thing overnight, so I'm on waking children up, getting them off to school duty. So now I have to get up earlier, take that one, come home, wake the other one up, get him prepped, get him on the bus and out the door. Like, get out of town. So I'm already like, "Oh, what reward am I getting tomorrow?" I
Well,
got Wendy's today, so I have to get something different. I'm already, yeah. The idea of getting up earlier and then having just a day full of shit. No. Like, future me is already like, "You bitch." You know what I mean? Yeah.
yeah.
Future
Yeah, I
me is
feel
not
it.
a fan of, past and present me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
At
Well,
least she's used to it.
future me can relate. Listen, on that note, what you drinking over there?
Oh god, I've been in such a tizzy and a rush all day. I'm doing a Coke and a water for now.
What am I doing? My new obsession,
Oh,
Sunny D, my Sunny
yes.
D vodka seltzer yet again. It's almost empty, so guess what? We can't get to this first break quick enough so I can replenish. Um, we're talking this week, of course, about Phil Hartman. This is a case we have been talking about from when we first started True Crime and Cocktails, when we were so young and full of hope 3, 4 years ago. Who knows how long? Um, this was actually our March patrons poll winner. If you're interested in learning on how you can vote to help pick one episode per month on this main feed of the show, go over to patreon.com/True Crime and Cocktails to learn more about that subscription based service over there. In the meantime, in case you're not familiar, let's give you a little background right now. Hi, I'm Laura Nash. You may remember me from such beloved sitcoms as Superstore and Not Dead Yet. Today, I'm here to tell you about comedy legend Phil Hartman, who became a household name in the early 90s as a cast member on Saturday Night Live. With numerous movies, TV shows, and voice gigs under his belt, Phil's star was on the rise when his life was tragically cut short in 1998. So, what happened to Phil Hartman? How did he end up being murdered by the person closest to him? And just how many nostalgic references will Christy try and sneak into this episode? Stay tuned to find out.
Thank you so much.
That was my best Troy McClure.
Oh God. It's just when you're when you're writing an episode that features someone that you have been a fan of for so much of your life,
Of course.
you're gonna do everything you can to have as many references as possible. I've lost it. I would like you to know. Present me, cuckoo bananas. Not
Sure.
even just my bananas aren't even in pajamas at this point. They're just full cuckoo, is what they
Yeah.
are. Oh, that reminds me, I do need to go buy bananas. Anyhow, I just again, I mentioned it at the end of the last episode when we talked about doing this one. I cried
Mhm.
multiple times during writing this and researching things, and it's just going to be a difficult episode to get
Of
through. So
course.
there's going to be a lot of
Course.
uncomfortable laughter
Let's do it.
because that's how I handle it,
Of course.
you know. Oh, Lord. So I love that I have a lamp. There we go. I turned on two lamps, and that's not like me because then I can't see the paper. It's fine. Again, what the fuck's up, present me? I don't know. I don't have an answer for you. But what I do have is a disclaimer.
Please.
This episode will contain mentions of substance abuse, physical abuse, and suicide, so trigger warning for those who need it. Philip Edward Hartman, known as Phil, was born September 24th, 1948, in Brantford, Ontario, Canada.
Didn't
If
know that.
Yeah, right? Oh, the amount of times I said, I had no idea during this
Huh.
whole thing. Bananas. Again, I gotta stop saying bananas. Maybe I don't.
Not on
So
my
if
account.
if Brantford is familiar to you, it's probably because it is also the birthplace of the great one himself, Mr. Wayne Gretzky. If you're not familiar, Brantford is about 105 kilometers southwest of Toronto. So Phil was the fourth of 8 children born to Rupert and Doris Hartman. Phil's younger sister, Sarah, who was born October 1951, had a condition called Angelman syndrome. According to the Mayo Clinic, it is a neurogenetic disorder which causes delayed development, problems with speech and balance, hyperactivity, and sometimes seizures. Due to her condition, Sarah suffered from severe seizures and had such a low immune system that she was almost always sick, just constantly. She required around the clock care, which fell to her mother, Doris. But after 5 years, Doris ended up suffering a breakdown and was hospitalized from exhaustion. So Doris's brother-in-law, who was a priest and believed he was responsible for the religious well-being of his extended family, demanded that Sarah go to a facility that was better equipped to care for her. So by the age of 6, Sarah was taken to a facility where, from the best I can tell, she spent the rest of her life because
Jesus.
there is just not really anything about her after that point. Sarah remained in that facility in Canada even after the rest of the Hartman family moved to Maine in March 1957.
Wow.
It was later said that Phil really struggled with his sister being left behind, especially since the Hartmans added 2 more children at some point after Sarah's birth.
Right.
So, after a brief stint in Maine, the Hartmans moved to Connecticut, where they stayed for a few years before moving to California. While in school, Phil had a reputation as a class clown, doing whatever he could to make people laugh. Phil later said, quote, I supposed I didn't get what I wanted out of my family life, so I started seeking love and attention elsewhere. After graduating from high school, Phil studied art at Santa Monica City College. He dropped out in 1969 after his older brother John, who was a band manager at the time, offered Phil the position of roadie for the band Rockin' Foo. I
Okay.
mean, come on. Fun fact, the band played a gig in Los Angeles in June 1969 at a club owned by a friend of Jimi Hendrix. During the Rockin' Foos set, Jimmy, who was there, decides to get on stage and jam with them. So Jimmy's drummer, Buddy Miles, gets on stage and joins them. But when Buddy hit the kick drum, it he hit it so hard it moved a foot away from him. So Phil ran on stage and physically held that drum in place for the rest of that set.
Probably damaging his hearing in the process.
Oh,
Having your
very
head next
easily.
to a bass drum for, the duration of a set of rock music, I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know.
I mean, but I'd like to think that Phil then could say he shared a stage with Jimi Hendrix.
That's nice.
So that's something. In
Absolutely.
in the 60s. Like that's like come on, that's next level. So later that year, Phil met a woman named Gretchen Lewis. They quickly married months later in March 1970, but things soon went south and they divorced in September 1972. After the divorce, Phil returned to post secondary education. He studied graphic arts at California State University, Northridge, and then started his own graphic design business. Since by then, John, his brother, had his own management company, Phil was then hired to create album covers for numerous bands.
Hey, I didn't know that.
Me neither. Some of those bands, America, Poco, Neil Young, Steely Dan, Crosby, Stills and Nash. He had also previously created the album covers for Rock and Foo.
That's amazing.
There's even one in particular where it's like, I think the three, maybe there's four of them, I can't fully remember. The band members hand drawn, and underneath you see the tiny Hartman uh signature.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, it's I had no idea. I had no idea. But that's why we're here today. Just as much of the fun stuff as I could find.
Yes.
So it was said that Phil created more than 40 album covers during his time as a graphic designer. His personal favorite was the Poco album Legend. I will post a picture of the cover on our socials at True Crime and Cocktails on Instagram and Facebook, and on Twitter at Not Detectives, because yes, I still call it Twitter. I'm an elder millennial. We hate change. So while Phil loved creating art, he discovered he also had a deep rooted passion for comedy. So he went to the Groundlings, which is an improv company that was formed in 1972. So many famous people got their start with the Groundlings. I absolutely don't even have time to name them all, but I'm going to give you a list that seems incredibly long as it is. But Maya Rudolph, Anna Gasteyer, Jennifer Coolidge, Chris Kattan, Will Ferrell, Julia Sweeney, Michael McDonald, Phil Lamar, John Lovitz, Lisa Kudrow, Kristen Wiig, Jim Rash, Melissa McCarthy, and one of my forever favorites, Edie McClurg.
Oh, yeah.
I love her. So the Groundlings, which had grown to about 90 performers by 1975, started holding auditions for potential new members. Phil attended the first audition and officially joined the company. They described Phil as a hurricane on stage in the best way. At the Groundlings, Phil met some of his closest friends, including John Lovitz, Paul Rubens, and Cassandra Peterson. Cassandra is probably more well known as Elvira, Mistress of the Dark.
Oh my God, of course.
And of course, Paul Rubens is better known as Pee Wee Herman.
Yes.
Fun fact, yet another thing I had no idea about. Phil Hartman actually helped Paul create the character of Pee Wee. And he helped write the 1985 movie Pee Wee's Big Adventure.
Oh, wow.
He also played a small role as a reporter in the movie. He also appeared as Captain Carl in both the Pee Wee Herman Show, which was a stage show turned HBO special in 1981, and in 6 episodes of the 1986 series Pee Wee's Playhouse.
Huh.
I kind of assume, I didn't look this up, so it's wild that I'm even bothering to say it. I kind of assume his character might have been replaced by Cowboy Curtis.
Captain Carl, Cowboy Curtis.
It feel right? Like
Yeah.
it
Also,
feels
shout out Lawrence Fishburne.
chameleon.
Thank you muchly. Yeah.
It is what it is. You know what I mean? Okay. So, uh, once I start talking about Pee Wee Herman, I'm getting ahead of myself is the point. So if we take like a brief step back, in 1979, Phil appeared on The Dating Game
Ah.
when the bachelorette or contestant or however we're calling it asked what kind of road sign she would be. Phil responded, "Slippery when wet." And yet somehow he won the show and was chosen for the date. But according to Phil, the woman stood him up.
Oh my God. Come on.
The Dating Game side note.
Please.
The game show seemed to be a popular stop for many would-be actors who were looking to break into the biz. The list includes, but is not limited to, Suzanne Summers, Leif Garrett, Lee Majors, Tom Selleck. Can you imagine?
No.
Farrah Fawcett, Andy Kaufman, Michael Richards, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Lindsay Wagner, Burt Reynolds, Steve Martin, and John Ritter. John Ritter. I mean,
Wow.
I can't imagine. Some celebrities even went on the show after they became famous, including Sally Field, Ron Howard, Michael Jackson, Maureen McCormick, Richard Dawson, and Paul Lynde.
Huh.
Richard Dawson I find fascinating because he was just full mouth kissing
Yeah.
every woman on The Feud.
Yeah. Yes. Different
Young,
time.
old, didn't matter.
Not excusing it. Not
Nope.
excusing it at all. But
no,
yeah.
it's just wild that I don't even know. I just want to know, was he, I guess it was always a woman looking at the and having 3 men as an option, right? Did they ever
Was
have
it?
one where it was a man and had 3 women as an option?
Great question. I don't know.
Because I'm fascinated to know, like, did the woman know that Richard Dawson, like the Richard Dawson, was one of those men? I don't even know. Doesn't matter. Anyhow, I mean, for the love of God, we're a true crime show, so you know I can't mention The Dating Game without mentioning Rodney Alcala.
Of
Is that
course.
how we say it? He appeared as a bachelor on the show in 1978. The thing about Rodney was, while he was introduced on the show as a photographer who liked skydiving and motorcycling, the truth was he was a serial killer.
Yeah.
Between 1971 and 1979, Alcala was linked to at least 8 murders. Authorities believe the real number of victims could be as high as 130.
Wow. That's quite
Which
elite.
it is. It really is. He was arrested in the summer of 1979, and after a trial the following spring, he was found guilty and sentenced to death. The verdict was overturned twice, but Alcala was eventually sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. He died in prison of natural causes in 2021. Oh, and just to further creep us all out, just know that when that serial killer appeared on The Dating Game, which he appeared on it mid serial killing, like in the middle of his spree, he was selected for the date. But the woman refused to go because she said she actually kind of found him creepy.
Wonder why. Good
So
for her. Could have saved her
good
own
for
life, by the way.
I guarantee it. Yeah, good for her. So It was a good thing for Phil Hartman that his dating game date did not work out because soon after appearing, Phil met Lisa Strain. The couple got married in December 1982, but Lisa said within weeks of their wedding, things started to change. She said that Phil lacked vulnerability and immediately shut down and refused to share his feelings. Other friends agreed that when things got too real, Phil would often try and just leave the situation. Lisa later said she knew their marriage was over on their first wedding anniversary when she tried to get him to open up emotionally. He told her, quote, "You're a black hole. No one could ever fill you."
Wowzer.
Yeah. So maybe his friends were onto something that he just got uncomfortable when things got real. Phil and Lisa eventually divorced in 1982. Despite Phil's personal life not going well, things seemed promising with his career. Throughout the 80s, he had small parts in movies like The Gong Show, Cheech and Chong's Next Movie, Jumpin' Jack Flash, Three Amigos, Blind Date. He also did a lot of commercials, including Slice Soda, Church's Fried Chicken, TGI Fridays, and the Atari ice hockey game.
Ah,
Yeah. Phil also came to be known for his absolutely smooth, iconic voice. He can be heard in the 1984 Van Halen music video, Hot for Teacher. He was also uncredited as a newsreader in an episode of Magnum PI and in the movie Ruthless People. Phil was also uncredited as the voice of one of the Dinks in the 1987 Gem Spaceballs. Uh,
ah.
for those who might not remember, the Dinks were basically like Jawas. I say that with all of you keeping in mind that I don't know what a Jawa is, but I assume anyone who has watched a Star War will know.
Little
So
guys with the glowing eyes and the hoods and the little
in the little
robes,
like a robe. Got it.
the short ones.
Got it.
Yeah.
Sure. Great.
You've seen them.
Oh, I'm sure I have. I've seen the Dinks. I'll say that. That's not a soundbite we need.
Why did it make me want to immediately say, well, we have the meats? I don't know.
I
You've
love
seen
that.
the Dinks? I have the meats. Shout out
I
Arby's.
I how many how many fast food places can we get in
We're
this?
trash people. We're just trash people. That's the truth. That's why they're still listening. That's why. Because we're honest about it.
Yeah, that is
That's
true.
it.
That is true.
Yeah.
What I love is I'm convinced that's why the people who are here have stayed, and that's why the people who aren't here have left.
Yeah. I think you're
We are
damn
who we
right.
are.
You know what? Anyone who wants to leave because we enjoy fast food and Sunny D seltzers can ride the toe of my boot. See you never.
And you know what? We like and enjoy fast food when it's not $40 for a couple of sandwiches.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
So apparently I'm not done talking about Dinks because fun fact, some of the other Dinks from Spaceballs were voiced by Rob Paulson, Tress MacNeille, John Paragon, and Corey Burton. Now, if those names are not immediately familiar to you, let me give you a bit of a thrill. Keeping in mind that these people are legends and have voiced so many iconic characters that I do not have time to list them all. So this is just highlights, bare bone highlights. Corey Burton was Dale on Chippendale Rescue Rangers.
Wow.
He was Count Dooku on Clone Wars,
Mm-hmm.
and he was Ludwig von Drake on Mickey Mouse Club.
Wow.
Rob Paulson, Raphael on a little program, TMNT. I was worried if I said the letters, I would not say them in the correct order.
You did it.
Rob was also Yakko Warner, Pinky, and Dr. Otto Scratch and Sniff on Animaniacs. John Paragon was most notably Jambi the Genie and and Terry on Pee-wee's Playhouse.
Of course.
He also played Richard Fletcher in UHF, which I only mention because my husband loves that movie. Then we have Tress MacNeille. It is so hard to narrow down her iconic career, um, but she has voiced both Chip and Gadget on Rescue Rangers, Dot Warner on Animaniacs, and so many characters on The Simpsons, including Agnes Skinner, the crazy cat lady, Bernice Hibbert, Cookie Kwan, Mrs. Muntz, and Lunch Lady Doris.
Impressive.
It's just insane. Um, and I know that it's too late now because we're already in the thick of it. But this is the moment I'm going to warn you that I may get distracted throughout this episode and go on an unrelated tangent because 90s pop culture is my kryptonite.
Yep,
I think we all knew that.
we did.
So, talking iconic voice actors is a beautiful segue to getting back to talking about Phil Hartman. Not only did he provide voices for characters in movies like The Brave Little Toaster and The Page Master,
Mm.
he also did numerous characters in shows like The Jetsons, DuckTales, The Smurfs, Bobby's World, Tiny Toon Adventures, Tailspin, Ren and Stimpy, Darkwing Duck, Animaniacs, and Captain Planet and the Planeteers. Phil also voiced multiple characters in the 1986 Dennis the Menace animated series, including Mr. Wilson.
Oh, wow.
Phil also used that iconic voice to audition for the role of the announcer on The Price is Right.
To replace Rod Roddy, maybe.
Well, the show premiered in 1972 with Johnny Olson as the announcer. Johnny was previously known as the announcer for Press Your Luck and Love Connection. Johnny appeared on 3,089 episodes of The Price is Right until his death in October 1985.
Wow.
While Phil did audition to replace Johnny, the role eventually went to Rod Roddy, who at that point was most known as the announcer on the series Soap from
Mm.
1977 to 81. Although he was also the announcer for so many game shows, Body Language, Tattletales, Concentration, To Tell the Truth, Now You See It, Match Game. I mean, now we're just getting iconic.
Yeah.
But Rod Roddy appeared on 2,840 episodes of The Price is Right. He remained on the show for 17 years until his death in 2003. The current, nobody asked, the current Price is Right announcer is George Gray, who has been doing the role since 2010.
Wow.
So, around the time of his Price is Right audition, Phil decided to alter the spelling of his last name. Now, Hartman was originally spelled with two N's on the end, but he decided to drop the last N because he felt that made it more Hollywood friendly. Sure. It didn't make it sound different,
Yeah.
but sure, you do you. Then, in 1986, Phil met Vicky Jo Omdal at a party. Vicky was born April 11th, 1958, in Thief River Falls, Minnesota. In May 1977, Vicky married Douglas Torfin, but the couple divorced soon after. And while a lot of places on the internet claim they divorced in 1986, they actually divorced years earlier because Douglas remarried in 1980. But Douglas is not the point of this story, so we are moving on. But Vicky moved to California where she did some modeling and hoped to become an actress. Soon after arriving in Los Angeles, she apparently dated Rob Reiner.
Hmm.
Yeah. And just like Phil trying to make his name better suited for Hollywood, Vicky started going by the name Brendan before ultimately settling on the name Bryn. So for the sake of consistency, I will just refer to her as Bryn for the remainder of the episode. Bryn loved going to parties. She really seemed to enjoy LA nightlife. Unfortunately, she started using cocaine, and even after a brief stint in rehab, by the time she met Phil in 1986, Bryn was struggling with substance abuse. But Phil was just immediately drawn to her, and the couple immediately fell into an intense relationship where they just fought all the time. One of those constant fighting but can't quit kind of things.
Right.
But that didn't stop Phil from thinking of proposing. When he mentioned it to his good friend Cassandra Peterson, aka Elvira, she said, quote, "Oh God, no." And from that reaction alone, Cassandra and Phil had a falling out despite their decade-long friendship. Cassandra described Bryn as a very troubled person with a lot of problems. But Phil was in love, and even though they had broken up in the summer of 1986, Phil, who had since moved to New York, flew back to Los Angeles to see Bryn in January 1987. They rekindled, and Bryn moved to New York, where she got a secretarial job and signed up for acting classes. They were married in a small ceremony on November 25th, 1987. Phil's close friend Julia Sweeney later said that Phil and Bryn's relationship was a win-win for both of them. Phil was looking for a beautiful trophy wife, and Bryn seemed to be looking for someone who could boost her career. That's one of the couple's closest friends, to be clear.
Right.
But what could Phil do for Bryn's career at this point? By then, his own career had started to struggle with few roles coming his way. But in 1986, during a break in their relationship, Phil auditioned for a little sketch comedy show called Saturday Night Live.
The plot thickens. Well, listen, let's take a quick break, hit the can, grab a drink, and we're going to be right back with more on the Phil Hartman episode of True Crime and Cocktails. All right, clap two on three. 1, 2, 3. Welcome back to this episode of True Crime and Cocktails. We're, of course, discussing the case of Phil Hartman. Before the break, we were getting into potentially a troubled marriage and SNL.
This is where you're going to lose me.
Yep. Yep.
So Saturday Night Live, or SNL, as I will often refer to it because it's just so much easier, premiered in October 1975. After a decade, though, the show became a bit stale and it seemed as though it was on its last legs. Phil first auditioned 11 years after discovering his love of performing. He was 38 at the time of his audition. Phil first got on SNL's radar when his friend Paul Rubens brought Phil and another friend along to help write material for Paul's SNL episode in November 1985. SNL creator Lorne Michaels was so impressed with Phil that he urged him to audition for the show, and then he was added to the cast the following season, which was season 12. The cast of that season also included Dana Carvey, Jan Hooks, Kevin Nealon, Victoria Jackson, John Lovitz, Nora Dunn, and Dennis Miller. And little did they know at the time, but that very season would usher in a new golden era of SNL. Now, I know that this is going to ruffle some feathers, but no, it is my personal opinion. So if yours is different, that is absolutely okay. Nothing before or since has surpassed the SNL of the 90s. It is the version that I grew up on, so I'm probably looking at it through the rose-colored glasses of nostalgia. But I present to you a list of characters and sketches from the 90s, which I feel is enough evidence, Your Honor, to back up my claim that the 90s were peak Saturday Night Live.
Please.
Now, the first one I have listed is Toonce's The Driving Cat. That technically debuted in 1989. So I have to be clear about that. That was technically 80s if you want to go that way. Wayne's World. It's Pat. Church Chat with the Church Lady. The Spartan Cheerleaders. Motivational speaker Matt Foley. The Roxbury Guys. Rich Meister. Making copies. Chris Kattan as Mango. Deep Thoughts by Jack Handy, Stuart Smalley, Opera Man, Sprockets, Mary Catherine Gallagher, Simon, who likes to do his drawings,
Oh,
The Ladies' Man, Sally O'Malley. I I can't. Delicious Dish, Celebrity Jeopardy, Pumping Up with Hans and Franz, and one of my personal favorites, Coffee Talk with Linda Richman,
yes.
because the whole bit, I mean, it's played by Mike Myers, but the whole bit where Linda gets verklempt and then she just goes, talk amongst yourselves. I'll give you a topic. And then it's the most serious fucking topic on the planet, like Russian Revolution, something or other. And then it's just, oh, discuss. It kills me. The amount of those clips I have watched in the last week, distracting me from my own work. I mean, it was worth it. Um, and also, do not get me started on the sketch from season 16 with Chris Farley and Patrick Swayze as Chippendales dancers, or the Gap Girls sketch from season 19 when Chris Farley goes, lay off
Lay
me,
off
I'm
me, I'm
starving.
starving.
I quote that constantly,
Same.
constantly. Uh, but I could honestly spend hours quoting 90s SNL, the parody commercials like Oops, I Crap My Pants, Hibernal, Colon Blow, and the classic Love Toilet. And yes, I know that SNL had good moments both before and since the 90s. I'm just saying, in my opinion, the episodes in the 90s were more consistent. Fun fact about the show: in the opening credits, when you see Phil Hartman in a diner speaking to a blonde woman, that woman is Bryn. And she desperately wanted to show her face to the camera in that moment, but that's not how it worked in those clip bits at the beginning.
Yeah.
Um, but the director just refused because it's supposed to focus on Phil. Uh, and when you look at that clip in the opening, you can see Bryn's earring is swinging wildly around. And it's because Bryn was trying to look at the camera and the director yelled at her. So she snapped her head back. So in that moment, when they're like, Phil Hartman, you can see him look at the camera and you can just see her little earring just swinging away because she had quickly snapped her head. Um, to look away like she was supposed to. I just find it fascinating. But another fun fact: Phil was among the writers on the show who won an Emmy for writing in 1989. Because when he was hired in 1986, he was brought on as both a cast member and as a writer. I'm ashamed to say I don't think I knew he wrote for SNL. I mean, I was a child, so how would I?
Well, it's
But
interesting because a lot of the cast just does. Like, they'll be paired with somebody or they'll write stuff on their own. So it's
sure.
interesting that there was, like, such a delineation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Saturday Night Live is where Phil came alive. He became known for his solid impressions of people like Ed McMahon, Phil Donahue, Frank Sinatra, Ronald Reagan, and of course, Bill
Bill
Clinton.
Clinton.
Phil also did sketches as Frankenstein. There were times where he played Jesus. He had his own characters he made, like Unfrozen Caveman Lawyer. And one of my personal favorites, Eugene, he prefers to be called Gene, the anal retentive chef,
Of course.
who spends so much time cleaning and preparing the food that he never actually gets around to cooking. Um, I mean, there's one where Eugene, he's making like, I don't know what it was, like pepper steak or something. And so he's trying to show everybody how perfectly he cut all of these green peppers in advance. They're all exactly the same size, oof, except that one. And so he'll like pick one out. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, he's just going to throw them all out, start again. But to throw them out, you have to lay down paper towel, put the green onion on it, wrap it in tin foil, then put it in a paper bag, then roll the paper bag down and tape it shut because heaven forbid it spills on any of the garbage. It's the fact that he wants the garbage to be pristine, I couldn't love more. He had a tape dispenser on his counter because he used it so often. It had a little knitted cozy on the top of the tape. I can't stop. Look, his delivery was fantastic. And he was meant for it. But Phil left Saturday Night Live in 1994 after 152 episodes. His final episode, which was episode 20 of season 19, was hosted by Heather Locklear with musical guest Janet Jackson.
Mm.
What a hell of a show. It was also the final episode with Kevin Nealon as the anchor for Weekend Update, and the final show for Rob Schneider, Sarah Silverman, Melanie Hutzel, and Julia Sweeney. At the end of the episode, because so many were leaving, oh God, they did the song from Sound of Music, the So Long Farewell. And at the very end, the last two people on stage are Phil and Chris Farley, and they sing together, and I can't, yeah, get into it. Um, but it was just incredibly beautiful, them on stage together, and the way that Chris looks at Phil. Um, but just the fact that within 4 years, both of them would be gone.
Isn't that wild?
It's a lot. But of course, this episode is specifically focusing on Phil. But I'm not gonna mention Chris without mentioning he did die from a drug overdose in December 1997 at just 33 years old. And I'm gonna say it, it is a loss still felt in comedy.
Oh, yeah.
I've said what I've said. Phil said of Chris, quote, always have and I always will love Chris Farley, and I'll forever cherish that I knew and worked with one of the great comedic talents of all time. After Phil's final show, the cast presented him with a bronzed glue stick because they referred to Phil as the glue that held their show together. He is often credited as the man who saved Saturday Night Live. He would return later to host the show on two separate occasions. So, around the time that he had first auditioned for SNL, he and Bryn had broken up. But after moving to New York, he realized he wanted to be with her. So, on their first break on the show in early 1987, Phil went to patch things up with Bryn, and by the end of the year, they were married. During his time at SNL, Phil and Bryn welcomed a son, Sean, in June 1988, and a daughter, Bergen, in February 1992. Bergen was actually born on a Saturday, so her birth was mentioned by Susan Day, who was a host of the show that night, at the end of the episode, which was a really beautiful moment. But the Hartmans went back and forth between New York and California. They had an apartment in New York where they lived while Phil was filming the show. And they also had a 4,000 square foot home in Encino where they lived the rest of the year. After he left Saturday Night Live, Phil and his family moved to Encino full time. And thanks to SNL, Phil was a popular guy. He did a lot of rounds on talk show circuit. In fact, he appeared on Letterman 13 times between 1989 and 1996. But let's take a quick look at his career after SNL. Like his time before, Phil did some commercials, like spots for M&M's, Cheetos, McDonald's, Yellow Pages, Magnavox, and Friskies cat food. He also did one in the UK for pot noodles. And just like his time before SNL, afterward, he continued doing voice work. His most well known gig, easily, is The Simpsons, which he actually started doing in 1991. Phil spent 52 episodes voicing characters Lionel Hutz and Troy McClure. He was also the monorail huckster, Lyle Landley.
Of course.
But look, Troy McClure is one of my favorite characters to ever exist.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
not even animated, just in the history of existence. Um, so I have to tell you my two favorite quotes, both of which are from season 7. I mean, I don't have to tell you, but I'm going to because you can't stop me. So the first is from the 138th episode spectacular, which was a clip show. And it starts off with Troy saying, quote, "Right about now, you're probably saying, 'Troy, I've seen every Simpsons episode. You can't show me anything new.' Well, you've got some attitude, mister." I mean, I am
I can hear that in his voice.
that see, and that's the thing. This is not Troy McClure, obviously. I couldn't even come close, but in his voice, like, it's just next level. And then, I mean, it's probably funnier if I explain more of it, but I won't, for the sake of time. But there was, of course, Troy McClure is known for being in the videos they force the kids to watch at school. And in the episode where Lisa is becomes a vegetarian, they make the kids watch a video that's called "Meat and You Partners in Freedom." Freedom. And there's this whole thing where Troy is taking this child to a slaughterhouse to explain how it goes from a cow in a field, to meat on his plate. There are so many things about it that make me laugh, but my favorite is at the end, he says to the kid, quote, "Don't kid yourself, Timmy. If a cow ever got the chance, he'd eat you and everyone you care about." It's just I mean, there's so many things in that tiny, tiny bit. I mean, first of all, the kid's name wasn't Timmy. He screwed up the kid's name 8 times in that little clip.
Classic.
And then it was he's taking the kid to the slaughterhouse, and he goes, "Well, come on, Jimmy," because I think he called him Jimmy then at that point. He's like, "Come on, Jimmy, we're gonna go check out the kill floor." And the kid just goes pale, and he goes, "Don't don't let the name fool you. It's not really a floor, actually. It's more like it's I can't. Troy McClure. God, man, Troy McClure, man." But Phil later referred to his time on The Simpsons as, quote, "the one thing that I do in my life that's almost an avocation. I do it for the pure love of it." I'll say it, it shows.
Yeah.
It absolutely shows. Phil also appeared in movies like Coneheads, Greedy, House Guest, Sergeant Bilko, Jingle All the Way. And here she goes again. My personal favorite. So I Married an Axe Murderer.
Course.
To quote Phil in that movie, he was, quote, "Ranger John Johnson, but everyone here calls me
Calls me
Vicky."
Vicky.
One of the fucking funniest things I've ever heard. I don't know why. I can quote that scene to this day. It has stuck with me. It came out in 93, but it is still absolutely in my soul. His delivery was phenomenal. According to Phil, a fellow SNL alum, Mike Myers, wrote that character specifically for Phil, which, I mean, come on. Of course he did. After leaving SNL, Phil hoped to remain on the small screen with his own comedy sketch show for NBC called The Phil Show. Since Bryn had been pestering Phil to get her work, he planned to have her on the show as his wife or girlfriend. But the other writers on the show wanted Jan Hooks for the character, but Phil said it absolutely had to be Bryn. Phil then tried to develop a sitcom that included a role for Bryn, but neither of those shows made it to the pilot stage. Phil appeared on random episodes of other shows like Empty Nest, Caroline in the City, The John Larroquette Show,
Thank you very
of
much.
course, Seinfeld, Third Rock from the Sun. And then in 1995, the year following his exit from SNL, Phil was cast as Bill McNeil in the sitcom News Radio. The show, which ran until 1999, also featured Dave Foley, Stephen Root, Andy Dick, Maura Tierney, Vicki Lewis, Candy Alexander, and a certain angry, entitled wannabe alpha male podcaster whose name I'm not gonna bother saying. So, and to be clear, all those alpha men that are like, "You've got to be an alpha male." The whole point of an alpha male is there's only one, assholes. Think about it. Anyhow, she's unhinged.
I love it. I'm
So,
living for it.
oh God. So, while having consistent work is a positive thing for an actor, Bryn was upset about it. She told friends she felt Phil had chosen to do news radio instead of doing his own show. She said, quote, "He's doing this because he doesn't want to work with me." Uh, from the sounds of it, Phil was not the reason his own show didn't get made. There are so many other uh, things that have to happen to make that happen, and I just don't think he was the one that said, "No, we're not doing it."
No.
But of course, she would be upset. Um, she asked him to help her get acting roles, and at this point, she'd had like a bit part on an episode of Third Rock from the Sun and a small two-line role in the movie North, which was directed by her ex-boyfriend Rob Reiner.
Huh.
So Bryn's disappointment in her lack of career was really upsetting for her and caused a lot of friction between the couple. It appears she resented Phil for having the career that she wanted. It was said that Bryn would often get physical whenever they fought, including throwing things and slapping him. She was described as impulsive and insecure and was known for being angry whenever Phil would receive fan mail.
Oh boy.
Mm. She also refused to let Phil have any communication with his ex wife, Lisa, whom Phil had been on friendly terms with since their divorce. Now, according to Lisa, when she first heard that Phil and Bryn had their first baby, Lisa sent them a card congratulating them, which is a very lovely thing to do. Bryn responded with a 2-page letter that threatened to rip Lisa's eyes out if she ever spoke to Phil again.
Jesus.
A quote from that letter is, "Don't go near me or my family or I'll hurt you."
Wow.
When
Okay.
Lisa mentioned the letter to Phil, he said, quote, "Ah, you should have seen the letter she wanted to send. She's very intense." Yeah. The fact that
Bowser.
she showed it to him before and he was like, "Send it." Like, okay. Um, and look, I'm not surprised that Bryn had issues with Lisa. Allegedly, at some point, I don't know if it was current or like I don't know if it happened right away or if it was years later or when it was, but at some point after that card came from Lisa, Bryn asked Phil if she was his soulmate. And for whatever reason, Phil said no, Lisa was his soulmate.
What? Oh boy.
Which here's a tip. That's never the answer your partner wants to hear when you ask who their soulmate is.
No.
Never. Anyhow, but with all this fighting, it's not surprising that Phil spent a lot of his free time out of the house. He took a lot of trips to Catalina, going sailing with his friend Britt. It got to the point where Bryn allegedly hired a private investigator to follow them because she thought that Phil might be cheating on her and hiding it with this fake trip with his friend Britt. Um,
With his
he was
friend Britt?
he yeah, well, she didn't think they were together.
Mm.
Um, but she thought he was pretending to go with Britt, but actually going off and having affairs without her knowing. He was not.
Bryn and Britt just feels impossible.
Yeah, and Britt's a man in this case, by the way.
Great. That's
But
helpful.
yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of Brit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But again, to be clear, he was not cheating.
Yes.
He just wanted to go do the things he loved doing. Bryn and Phil also tried couples counseling, but it didn't have the lasting effects that they hoped it would. The chaos kind of led Bryn to spiraling into substance abuse. She was in and out of rehab multiple times. Each time she would leave after just a few days. And after a brief period of sobriety, the Hartmans threw a New Year's Eve party in 1997. At the party, Bryn asked Andy Dick if he had cocaine, and he gave her a bump. Andy later said that he didn't even know Bryn had a drug problem to begin with, because despite the turmoil going on behind closed doors, Phil and Bryn always seemed like a happy, healthy couple in public. Shortly after Bryn's relapse at the party, she returned to rehab, but then returned home just 5 days later. That same month, she started working with a friend on a screenplay for a movie called Reckless Abandon, which was said to be about the murder and mayhem that ensues after two women become ensnared in a drug smuggling ring, which feels like a heavy thing to write for someone really going through it. But in April, they gave Phil a copy of the script and he said he would help shop it around. He even agreed to play a role in the movie, but sadly, neither lived long enough to see the movie get made. Earlier that same month, one of the Hartmans' neighbors called 911 around 8 p.m. to report hearing 5 gunshots coming from the Hartmans' house. When police arrived on scene, they were unable to determine where those shots had originated.
Interesting.
Since the shots seemed to come from their house, it is more than possible that either Bryn or Phil was responsible because we know they did own firearms at the time. According to Phil, they bought 2 handguns for protection. They learned how to use them properly and even took self defense classes because of an extortion attempt.
Interesting.
Apparently, Phil, Bryn, and another couple, they went out together for the night, ended up at a strip club. One of the dancers offered Phil a lap dance. There apparently was a camera set up in the club, and the entire thing was filmed. Days later, Phil and Bryn find an envelope nailed to their front door. A tape of that moment was in the envelope, and there was a note that said they wanted $25,000. I don't know why the extortionist thought Phil was going to care if that video got leaked. I don't know if they thought Bryn might get upset about it because I don't think she would because Bryn was literally sitting beside him in the video.
Yeah.
So, she absolutely knew about it. I don't know if they thought maybe it would ruin his family man reputation. I don't know. But at this point, we know there were 2 handguns in the Hartman's house. We also know that Phil and Bryn had a volatile relationship and the fighting had escalated. But it should also be noted throughout the month of May, Phil and Bryn spent time with friends. They went out to karaoke. They had dinner with Rob Reiner. Friends said the couple seemed relatively happy and nothing seemed amiss. Which brings us to the night of May 27th, 1998. Phil spent the day with his friend Britt and returned home around 6 p.m. When he arrived, he asked Bryn if he could go to the Van Nuys airport where he kept his plane and his Ferrari. He returned home around 8. The nanny who was there until after Phil arrived said Phil and the children were laughing in the pool when she left. But while Phil was at the airport, Bryn went clothes shopping for her daughter, then met a friend for drinks at Boca de Beppo. Is that?
Buca de Beppo.
Thank you so much. They met around 7:30. The friend was TV writer and producer Christine Zander, who said that Bryn was, quote, in a good frame of mind. However, according to Christine, Bryn said she didn't feel valued at home and she felt that Phil didn't care enough about her needs or her career. Throughout their time at the restaurant, Christine said Bryn used a payphone twice, but it is unsure of who she called. After a couple of cosmopolitans, Bryn kind of wanted to keep the party going, but Christine was done for the night. So at 9:45, Christine went home and Bryn went to visit her longtime friend, Ron Douglas. As she left the restaurant, Bryn told the bartender next time she comes, she'll bring Phil with her. Which is,
Interesting.
yeah, I mean, it feels very like knowing what's coming in that moment. It feels like she planned on coming back at some point, but also name dropping your own husband feels weird.
Well, she seems the type.
Oh, it seems. Yeah. So Bryn arrived at Ron's house in Studio City around 10:15. Ron said Bryn had a couple of beers and complained about her marriage, saying Phil didn't spend enough time at home, and when he was at home, she felt he smoked way too much pot.
Oh.
Ron said Bryn seemed agitated and starved for attention. Bryn called a friend of hers at 12:36 but got no answer. She then called Phil's private line but also got no answer. She then called 411, but no one was ever able to find out why. At 12:45, Bryn left Ron's house and he told her to call him when she got home so he would know she made it. She did return home, but she didn't call Ron. When she got home, she said, or she didn't say, but she and Phil had a massive fight. Their son, Sean, later said he heard a door slam and heard his mother yell sorry 4 times. Phil apparently had recently been angry over a previous incident where Bryn had allegedly hit their daughter while she was under the influence, and Phil had threatened to leave her if she used substances again or if she caused any harm to their children. So one could speculate that perhaps this previous fight came up when Bryn returned home, especially when she was heard apologizing repeatedly. Friends said that Phil really disliked confrontation. So whenever their fights would get heated, he would often respond by just going to bed. So, from the best anyone can tell, Phil went to bed and Bryn stayed up on her own, drinking and possibly doing cocaine. Shortly before 3 a.m., Bryn went into the bedroom and shot Phil 3 times in the head and chest. At 3:25, Bryn called Ron to say Phil wasn't home, but he'd left her a note saying he was out. So she told Ron she was going to go over to his house, but he pointed out, "No, you can't. Like, your children are in bed and they're alone, and you shouldn't leave them alone." Well, 20 minutes later, Bryn showed up at his door anyway, and she said, quote, "Don't yell at me. Phil yells at me all the time." Then Bryn said, quote, "I killed Phil. I don't know why." Ron just didn't believe her in the moment. He said Bryn was quite inebriated, so he just thought she was talking nonsense. Bryn ends up passing out, and when Ron woke her, she ran to the bathroom to vomit. And apparently, this happened multiple times. She would pass out, he would wake her, and she would be physically ill. Bryn then asked Ron to call her house, but he never got an answer. Bryn then just starts like rifling through her purse, and a handgun falls out. So Ron picked it up, put it in a plastic Save On grocery bag, and put it in the trunk of his car. At 5:45, now this is now 2 hours since she first arrived, Ron agrees to go with Bryn to her house, but says they are taking separate vehicles, even though she was quite inebriated, which I find interesting.
Yeah.
Ron noted that Bryn drove erratically and blew through 2 red lights on the way. When they got to the Hartman's house, Bryn took Ron to the master bedroom where he discovered that Bryn had been telling the truth. Bryn said, quote, "Oh my God, he's dead. I told you I did. I told you I did. I killed him. I don't know why." Ron stepped into the hall to call 911, and while he was on the phone, Bryn locked herself in the bedroom. Ron thought it would be okay because he had Bryn's gun. What he didn't realize was there was a second gun in the house. He then heard what he said were agonizing screams and loud wailing coming from the bedroom. Just after 6 a.m., Bryn called her friend Judy to tell her that Phil was dead. When Judy asked what was going on, Bryn said, "I don't know. My life is over." Judy immediately headed over to the Hartman's house. She arrived to find police on the scene. Ron went through the house and found the Hartman's 9-year-old son, Sean, and took him outside to the police. Ron also gave the police the gun that was in his trunk. At 6:21 a.m., Bryn called her sister Kathy to tell her that Phil was dead. When Kathy asked what happened, Bryn said she couldn't remember. She then said, quote, "Tell the children that I love them." And after emitting a series of what Kathy described as bone-chilling shrieks, Bryn said she had to go and she hung up. At 6:32, the police called the landline in the bedroom. They asked Bryn how many people were in the house, and she quietly said, "Help me," before hanging up.
Jesus.
Bryn called Kathy a second time and said, "Take care of my children. Just let them know how much I love them." When police officers started to call out to Bryn through the door, she told Kathy she had to go and she hung up. Bryn then got into bed next to Phil's body, propped herself up against the headboard, and shot herself in the head. The gunshot was heard at 6:38 a.m. Police called out for Bryn, and when she didn't answer, they broke down the bedroom door to find both Phil and Bryn. One officer said it was obvious they weren't alive. The Hartmans' 6-year-old daughter, Bergen, was found in a bedroom at the back of the house, cowering in a corner with a blanket over her head. It seems that she was still in the house when that final gunshot happened, but she was removed from the home safely. I can't even begin to imagine the amount of trauma that those children
Oh,
went through after this.
my God.
At the time of his death, Phil Hartman was 49 years old. He was described as charismatic, easygoing. He had a great love of the outdoors. He also had a reputation of being one of the nicest and most well-liked actors in Hollywood, and he was described as a true joy to work with. Sadly, his father, Rupert, died just 1 month before Phil. Rupert was 83 and suffered from Alzheimer's at the time.
Mm.
Bryn Hartman was just 40 years old. She was described as sweet, goofy, generous, and a beautiful soul. Everyone who knew Phil and Bryn all agreed that they were both incredibly loving and devoted parents. According to Phil's autopsy report, he suffered multiple gunshot wounds, including one shot to the right side of his neck and another shot that went through his forearm, exited, and then entered his right lower chest. The shots were said to be no more than 18 inches away, or the gun would have been held no more than 18 inches away from the body. The third shot was point blank to the middle of his forehead. It had stippling, meaning the gun was incredibly close for that shot. It is believed that Phil was sleeping when the first gunshot went off and that his death was instant. According to Bryn's toxicology report, her blood alcohol level was 0.12.
Oof.
The legal limit in California, 0.08. There was also cocaine and the antidepressant Zoloft in her system. No illegal drugs were found during a search of the home. So while it is uncertain where Bryn got that cocaine, we know that Bryn was first given Zoloft on March 26th, almost exactly 2 months before her death. It was a manufacturer's sample given to her by Arthur Sorosky, her son Sean's psychiatrist at the time. Bryn only used it for a week, but said that she suffered nausea and insomnia. She then went off it for 5 or 6 weeks because she had some sort of minor procedure done on her nose, and her doctor had advised her not to take it while she was recuperating. On May 24th, Bryn contacted Dr. Sorosky to say her symptoms had gotten worse. She then attempted to check into the Promises Rehab facility in Malibu, but there were no spots available at the time. A lot of people, including John Lovitz, believed that Andy Dick was responsible for Phil and Bryn's death, as he was the one who gave Bryn cocaine at that party 5 months earlier, causing her to relapse. John Lovitz was so convinced of Andy's guilt that he outright told Andy he was the one who killed Phil and it started a very long-running feud between the two. In 2007, John and Andy ran into each other at the Laugh Factory in West Hollywood, where, according to the club's owner, John, quote, picked Andy up by the head and smashed him into the bar 4 or 5 times, and blood just started pouring out of his nose.
Whoa.
Andy claims he should not be held responsible because he had no idea that Bryn ever had a problem with drugs to begin with. And I will just add, at the time of the party, Bryn was an adult and therefore capable of making her own decisions regarding drugs. And in my non-professional opinion, I think if Andy hadn't given Bryn cocaine at the party, she would have found it somewhere else another day. My
Oh, yeah.
my point is, I don't think Andy was to blame. With that being said, I'm also going to continue my non-professional opinion by saying it is very easy to vilify Bryn in this situation. What she did was shocking, and it is hard for us to understand what could possibly lead her to do what she did. I am in no way justifying what she did because in the end, she was responsible for her own actions. But I think we need to look at the situation with compassion and remember she spent years struggling with substance abuse and mental health issues, and she just didn't get the help she needed. Yes, she did try to get herself checked into rehab, but there was no availability. Well, the fact that she didn't look into another facility is how this whole story then ended in tragedy and how two children lost both their parents in a single moment.
Yeah.
Following Phil's death, his character on news radio was said to have suffered a fatal heart attack during the first episode of the 5th season. Sadly, the last line that Phil ever spoke on news radio was, quote, "But it's just a TV show. None of us really died, right, gang?"
Oh my God. What are the
I know.
chances?
I know. John Lovitz joined the cast in Phil's place. The show was canceled at the end of that season. To this day, John will not talk about his time on news radio. He said, quote, "Phil was like my brother, and it was horrible what happened." John and Phil had been close friends since meeting at the Groundlings in 1975. As I previously mentioned, they also starred on SNL together. They were both voices in The Brave Little Toaster and on The Simpsons. John appeared on 20 episodes as multiple characters, including critic Jay Sherman and Marge's prom date, Artie Ziff.
Of
Uh,
course.
yeah. After Phil's death, the producers of The Simpsons decided to retire the characters of Lionel Hutz and Troy McClure, saying that it didn't feel right for anyone else to portray them. I honestly believe that was the move.
Yes.
It was the move. A week before his death, Phil had been offered the role of Zap Brannigan on Futurama. While the role was created for him, Phil insisted on auditioning. After his death, the role was taken over by Billy West, who later admitted to tweaking his performance to try and match Phil's intended portrayal of the character. It was suggested that Philip J. Fry, the main character from Futurama, was named after Phil Hartman, but the show's creator has since stated that the character Philip was named after his own father, who had recently passed. So, Phil's final time on screen was the character Phil Fimple. There it is, in the movie Small Soldiers, which was released less than 2 months after his death. Phil's final public appearance was in early May when he did a press junket for the movie in Vegas. In May 1999, a year after Phil and Bryn's deaths, Bryn's brother, Greg Omdal, who was the executor of their wills, filed a wrongful death lawsuit on behalf of Phil and Bryn's estate and their children. The lawsuit was filed against both Zoloft manufacturer Pfizer and Dr. Sorosky, who had given the Zoloft samples to Bryn in the first place. The suit accused Dr. Sorosky of malpractice for prescribing medication to someone who was not a patient. It should also be noted that Dr. Sorosky gave Bryn the samples without knowing her medical history or doing any sort of evaluation beforehand. The suit alleged that a rare but previously documented side effect caused Bryn to be jittery, agitated, and out of touch with reality. One psychiatrist said that the side effects of Zoloft can cause restlessness, distress, and the feeling of being tortured from within.
Oh, God.
He added, quote, "It drives a person into extreme states of irritability, anger, and frustration. People can become more depressed and more despairing. Their impulse control loosens and they do stupid things. So the violent impulses an ordinary person would control come pouring out or even appear for the first time." This particular lawsuit was one of more than 170 wrongful death suits that were filed against Pfizer in the span of 12 years. Pfizer later settled this particular suit for $100,000 without any admission of any wrongdoing. I also could not find anything that ever happened to Dr. Sorosky following this. Phil and Bryn's children were sent to live with Bryn's sister Kathy and her husband Mike in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. The children were given different last names so that they could be raised in relative obscurity. Sean, who was just 9 at the time, has since earned a degree in art and has been pursuing his dream of being an artist and a musician. Bergen, who was just 6, has since completed a degree in communications and journalism. She got married in 2018. So thankfully, from the best I can tell, both before and after the deaths of their parents, Sean and Bergen were well loved. Phil and Bryn's ashes were scattered together at Emerald Bay off Catalina. In 1997, Phil was inducted into Brantford, Ontario's Walk of Fame. He was posthumously awarded a star on Canada's Walk of Fame in September 2012 and a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in August 2014. Both John Lovitz and Kevin Nealon gave speeches at the 2014 ceremony where it was said that there will never be another like Phil Hartman. Reporting for this devastating episode, I'm Christy Oxborrow, but everyone here calls me Blanche.
First of all, true. Second of all,
Yeah.
on that note, let's take a second break, grab another drink, hit the can one more time, and we'll be back to wrap it up and give our final thoughts and feelings on the Phil Hartman episode of True Crime and Cocktails. Final clap on 3. 1, 2, 3. Welcome back to this episode of True Crime and Cocktails. We're, of course, discussing the truly tragic death of Phil Hartman. Listen, only a few things here to comment on. But boy, will I take my time. The revelation that he was creating these album covers is amazing. I did a very quick Google because I was like, is there any that I would recognize? America's Greatest Hits. It seems that he created that album, and that is such an iconic album from my childhood. Mother Laurel was always listening to that. That was in rotation in our home, so that's just blown my mind. I've been through the desert on a horse with no name. It felt good to get out of the rain. The point is,
I'll be
what
honest.
a tune.
I didn't know that was America.
Yeah. What a tune, what a band, what an album cover. So cool. Interesting. Okay. You said Tom Selleck once competed on the dating game. I was like, who should be so lucky? I've also recently realized my boyfriend has a mustache. We all know, if you've listened to this show from the beginning, I have a thing for mustaches. But then I also couldn't figure out why I have this thing about the mustache baseball cap combo. And then I was like, because of Magnum PI. Like, it's just obvious. It's right there. I thought it was my love of like 90s baseball players, which also, by the way, still counts.
Fair.
Still counts. Yeah. But yeah, when I started,
there's a Venn diagram somewhere that has that in the middle. Yeah. Now, when are you going to buy him impossibly small shorts and some sort of Hawaiian shirt? Is he going to be Magnum PI for Halloween?
We haven't talked about that yet, but I don't know if it needs to be for Halloween or just around the house. The point is, it's going to happen. It has to.
If he could learn to start sliding across the hood of cars now, that he should have. He's going to need some time to practice, is my point.
Yeah. Well, he also drives a convertible.
Well,
Yeah.
I
It's starting to get obvious. Starting
yeah,
to get a little
yeah,
obvious. Anyway, um, okay, you're gonna love this. We're gonna get into I'm putting my psychology hat on.
of
And I want to
course.
preface all of this by saying I am not a professional. I'm not trained. I'm only regurgitating what's been shared with me. And if I get something incorrect, please fact check me. Fact check me, but don't repeat what I'm saying as being gospel. I'm not a TikTok psychologist. I'm not any
Sure.
psychologist, but I do think there's a couple of things that are interesting to note. We talk about his marriage to Lisa Strain, his first wife, where she said that he had no vulnerability. And when he was kind of pressed by her,
Yeah.
he said, "You're a black hole that can't be filled."
Yeah.
This immediately made me write down classic avoidant. Now, if you're not familiar, attachment theory, I'll read a little bit to you from the internet just to give you a little bit of background here. Attachment theory is the emotional connection, well, is a theory based on the attachment bond, which is the emotional connection you formed as an infant with your primary caregiver. According to attachment theory, the quality of the bonding you experienced during your first relationship often determines how well you relate to other people and respond to intimacy throughout your life. If your primary caretaker made you feel safe and understood as an infant, if they were able to respond to your cries and accurately interpret your changing physical and emotional needs, you likely developed a successful, secure attachment. As an adult, that usually translates to being self confident, trusting, hopeful, with an ability to healthily manage conflict, respond to intimacy, and navigate the ups and downs of romantic relationships. If you experienced confusing, frightening, or inconsistent emotional communication during infancy, though, if your caregiver was unable to consistently comfort you or respond to your needs, you're more likely to have experienced an unsuccessful or insecure attachment. Infants with insecure attachment often grow into adults who have difficulty understanding their own emotions and the feelings of others, limiting their ability to build or maintain stable relationships. They may find it difficult to connect to others, shy away from intimacy, or be too clingy, fearful, or anxious in a relationship. Now, of course, there are also other experiences that occur between infancy and adulthood that can also impact and shape our relationships. However, the infant brain is so profoundly influenced by the attachment bond, understanding your own attachment style can offer vital clues as to why you may be having issues in adult relationships. So basically, again, I'm giving such a crash course here. But when I learned about attachment theory and how we connect to other people, for me personally, it was like a light was being turned on. Not only for myself, but also in the relationships and traits you see in other people. As we just
Sure.
I'm not going to get into all of the details because I promise you this is going to come back to this to Phil Hartman. But of course, we talked about secure attachment. And then, of course, the other ways that you're kind of, when you have that inconsistent bond, it can develop anxious or ambivalent attachment, avoidant dismissive attachment, or disorganized attachment, which is kind of a combination. When I heard this specific about him in regards to Lisa, all I could think
Mm.
about was his sister and what he
Oh,
learned as a young
sure.
child. Now, I know that attachment theory does, of course, talk primarily about your uh, relationship with your first primary caregiver. And I'm not going to begin to speculate. I wasn't there. I don't know the people. But Phil also made a comment that you mentioned about how he sought laughter because he did not necessarily have that firm basis at home. So that suggests to me perhaps the sister situation could have been indicative of other dynamics. Again, I don't begin to assume or I'm not implying anything, but the sister thing, him as a child seeing that your sister was born with these issues and then we sent her away and she and never came back. What that's informing a young child brain is if you're less than, you could get abandoned and left behind. And of course,
Sure.
attachment is all about being able to be in, a secure relationship with someone, no matter if it's romantic or not. So when you brought up Lisa talking about this lack of vulnerability that he had, I was like, I feel like this is just classically playing into the classic avoidant personality which of course is very uncomfortable with intimacy, will run from intimacy, as was described when intimacy also could be arguments, etc. When there's that, because intimacy, of course, also means vulnerability. And if you're having an argument, that can mean he wants to flee, which is something that a lot of classically avoidant people will talk about, that it becomes too overwhelming. Then the other thing I would also offer is we know that the relationship that he had was described by very close friend Julia Sweeney as him looking for a trophy wife and Bryn, of course, looking for someone to help with her career. Now, that may sound crass. Sounds to me like that's what she believed. It would make sense that someone who has a classically avoidant personality would go for someone that he perhaps even knew was after him because he could help her career. Because right there, that's already putting a block on the vulnerability. That it's
Sure.
not requiring more of him on an intimate or emotional level, right? That relationship, when it's that, if it's based in that, and he knows it's based in that, that can be a relief to someone who has one of these attachments that maybe hasn't taken a look at it or wanted to, work through it. Why is any of this relevant? Well, in some senses, it's not. But I think it's just interesting in terms of painting this entire picture. He was going after someone, he chose to marry someone he knew going in had substance issues, struggled with that. Again, that's putting another barrier to having to be truly vulnerable with another person, right? Now, I'm not
Sure.
suggesting that his attachment style means that he invited to get murdered. Oh, not even close. There are lots of people that exist in these attachment styles in all of the relationships in the world, and they don't murder each other or get murdered. I'm not
Correct.
suggesting that. I think it's just interesting because if you listen to this show, I'm fascinated by psychology. It's a passion of mine. And I think it's just an interesting element in terms of who he was and the fact that he was seeking this validation externally through laughter, through providing entertainment. When at home, the dynamic of his relationship was seemingly quite different.
Hmm.
I offer that for no other reason than, again, I'm a fan. And listen, if you're interested in your own attachment theory, I suggest looking into it. There's quizzes you can take. It'll open doors and shine lights and all of the above. Um, my next note was Rod Roddy was the voice of my childhood. Anyway, so we're back in
Oh
it.
yeah. Ah! Yeah. Yeah, he absolutely was.
He absolutely
Yeah.
was. Absolutely was. Um, Now, the next thing I have to comment on, of course, when he was developing his own show, The Phil Show at NBC, it didn't get a pilot made. And then he booked News Radio. And his wife was like, pissed that he, quote, chose News Radio over his own show. He didn't choose not to make his own show. Speaking as someone who could speak in, I don't know, hypotheticals where perhaps they were also on a successful NBC show. And then perhaps they were also offered a development deal to make their own show. And then perhaps they got a great producing team that helped them develop that show, and then the dreams of that person got crushed about making their own show, and then that person may have got cast on another show as a lead on another network. The point is, yeah, you don't choose it; they choose it for you. They decide,
Yeah.
and I would be shocked to find out that he would have said, "Ah, I'm good." And it also just speaks to it doesn't matter. Phil Hartman was one of the biggest comedy stars in the world at that time, and he couldn't even get his own pilot made, which may help this other hypothetical person sleep a little better tonight, knowing perhaps that large trauma career wise wasn't as personal as she may have thought, hypothetically speaking. Um, Bryn asked if she was his soulmate, and he said, no, Lisa is. My God,
Oh, that's
that's a tough one.
that's rough.
That's
That
rough.
is that is a rough thing to hear.
Yeah.
Um, I think it is even worse if he had just said no and left it there.
Yes.
It is so much worse by naming someone.
Well, and here's what I would also offer, just to bring it back to my psychology talk.
Of course.
It's a very, again, what the fuck do I know? Again, I'm not trained. To me, my perception is that is something that someone who is avoidant, someone who is really avoidant, if their partner is asking them, am I your soulmate? Alarm bells might be going off because this is going to
Sure.
require a vulnerability. Here's the thing. He may have thought that Bryn was his soulmate. But
Sure.
but in that moment, it could feel so overwhelming to say that back he sabotaged it. He blew it the fuck up. He didn't just say no. He said, no, my ex-wife was.
Yeah.
So to me, when I hear that, I go, oh, that's an avoidant self-sabotaging. That's someone who is so averse to vulnerability that they're willing to blow things up in a really, for me, I would categorize that as extreme manner, because that's easier than having a real connection.
Sure.
My God.
Yeah.
Okay. You said he was taking many trips to Catalina, and then I just wanted to say, Catalina, sadly also the death place of Natalie Wood. If you're not familiar with the Natalie Wood case, go back to episode of True Crime and Cocktails to learn more. Should have Googled that number in the break.
Well, I mean, to be honest, if I had to guess, I mean, it was definitely season 2.
Yeah, famous fatalities.
And I think it was early, wasn't it? Like, I'm
I
going to
feel
say
like
like
it was.
22.
Yeah.
I'm going to test myself on the spot. How's it going to
Fact check
go?
yourself.
The answer is probably not well. Let's see.
Was
Well,
it
I
that
can
early?
tell you.
22. Wow.
Well, I can tell you this right now. Episode 22 was Elisa Lamb.
Okay.
So, no. Okay, I wasn't that far off. I wasn't that close. 37.
Okay.
So I was in
You were in the range.
I was close enough. But
Check out episode 37 of True Crime and Cocktails to learn more about that tragic case. Okay, we got to talk about the crime. We got to talk about the night before, leading into the morning of the murder, middle of the night, whatever you want to call it. It's interesting to me. She goes out with her girlfriend Christine. She talks about she doesn't feel valued at home and that Phil should care more about her career. That's hard for me as somebody who's in this industry, as somebody who,
sure.
again, what am I saying? Perhaps someone hypothetically could have had past partners very concerned with their being helped by that hypothetical human. Anyway, listen, this is just turning into a Sunny D vodka seltzer fueled airing of grievances. But the point is, I don't know, that just made my ears perk because at this point, they're deeply into this relationship. They have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old. And even if you started the relationship with kind of these dreams of wanting more for your career and maybe thinking he can help you, it is bold to still be holding on to that this deep in. One would hope, for example, that perhaps that could be the start of the relationship, but then it turned into a true love and a companionship and whatever, and maybe that fades. But at this point, the fact that this is still a huge topic of conversation for her is, to me, just a red flag in general. Now, it's not me saying that then she would kill him. If anything, that's a motive for her to not kill him, right? That he's very famous. She is not. He has what he can help her, in theory, get what she wants. I just thought it was interesting to speak to state of mind, that it's it's still at the surface for her.
Sure.
He should care more about my career. I mean, I think that it's fair to say that we can all care about our partners' careers and jobs, but it's nobody's responsibility to provide a career for their spouse.
Yeah. And I
And
mean,
if you're in that position that you can and you do and you're happy and nobody's getting hurt, God bless you. Who cares? But this just feels again I guess for me, it just felt like an immature thing to start with. That you would have thought that through years and years of a marriage and children and all of the above may have faded, but it clearly didn't for her, which I think is what's interesting to me.
No, I think it's because he just continued to get more and more famous. And then that just was more and more of a reminder that the whole point of coming out to California was having that big career. And then she did, Third Rock from the Sun, which was, I don't know if it was created by, but it was produced by Christine. So that's most likely how she got that bit. And then that role in North, which, directed by her ex-boyfriend. So I'm sure that's how she got that role. So it's like, look, people are getting me these roles. Why aren't you getting me anything?
Right.
And so it's just, she had a plan, she had a hope, and it just didn't work out in the way
Yeah.
she wanted.
Oh, certainly. Um, this whole kind of chronology, then she goes to see her friend Ron. She leaves at 10:45. She's obviously drunk at that point.
Oh, yeah, I think so.
So then goes home, they get into a fight. 3 a.m., she shoots Phil in his sleep, calls Ron, and goes back over. It's interesting to me that he's still awake at 3 a.m. I guess maybe she just knew he would be. I don't know.
It's possible. It's also possible she called him and he woke to the sound of the phone and was just
True.
because he
Oh, right,
also
because
was
this is
like he
this
was
is
like,
pre-cell
"Hey."
phones. I have to remind myself.
Yeah.
This is you have a home phone, so if your home phone's ringing at 3 a.m., you probably don't have the ringer off.
Yeah.
We didn't turn our ringers off back then, kids, in case you're young and
That
listening
is
to the
true.
show. Um, she was quite inebriated. "I killed Phil. I don't know why." Chilling.
I know.
Chilling. Um, I did, of course, have a moment where I was like, it's interesting that she was with Ron, came home, did this, and then went back to Ron. I was like, is that what happened? He wasn't at the house with her. He had nothing to do with this. We don't need him to have an alibi.
The best I can tell that, yeah. He
Look,
seemed very like, "She's back." Like,
right, right.
when she came back that second time, and it was just like he wasn't interested, but it was she showed up at his house, and she had been drinking, and then she had, like, just a couple of beers while she was there, and it's like, "Why are you giving her alcohol?" Not that I'm blaming him, I'm just saying in that moment, it's like, maybe don't be like, "Nope, there's nothing. Sorry.
Yeah.
How about a water? Maybe a coffee? Something."
Well,
Again,
and also, you know, the fact that he was like, "Oh, you're driving yourself." Like,
that was a strange, like, it's almost like he was like, "We absolutely have to take 2 cars," because I think he just didn't wanna be stuck there, and was like, "I'll go there, I'll be like, 'Here you go,
right.
put her to bed, and then I'll go home.'"
And then, of
Is
course,
what I
gets there and finds dead Phil Hartman and goes, "Oh my god."
Yeah, and then helps get, at least one of the kids out of the house,
Yeah.
which again, if you think about the children being left in
Oof.
that house alone with him, I pray neither of them woke up, went in to go see their parent because they needed something, found him, and then went back to bed because they had no idea what was going on. Like, we have no idea what happened. She was gone for hours.
Yeah.
Oof.
It's not good. Again, well, and we know that her judgment was impaired because of all of the substances, the fact that we know she was, you know, deep into alcohol, cocaine in her system, Zoloft in her system, like her judgment is not sharp
Right?
at this point. Um, I do think, I gotta say, and I would have to look more into like these other wrongful death suits that were brought against Zoloft, like to see like, is there something there that was like proof that
Sure.
this was happening in more, a lot of people. I do think, of course, if there is, as you stated, one psychiatrist said that people can become more violent on the drug, then I feel like that's, all valid. But more than that, I do think the lawsuit against that psychiatrist was warranted because
Oh,
it is
yeah.
a completely fair point. He should not be giving out whatever it was, like sample meds of
Yeah.
something that's, you know, I mean, all drugs are powerful, but like you shouldn't be giving out sample meds to someone that is not a patient of yours. Period. That is a problem. That
Oh,
violates
yeah.
your oath as a doctor. Um, So to me, again, and I know that you were saying you couldn't see any kind of like follow up about what happened to him, obviously, but to me, um, Pfizer aside for a second, I just thought personally that yeah, I would have absolutely filed that same lawsuit if this was my loved one. That's not okay. Psychiatrists, doctors, you
100%.
can't be doing that. If she
No.
was also a patient, different story, but he doesn't have any sort of knowledge of he potentially doesn't even know she's on cocaine. And then it gets into a bigger conversation where it's like, I would suggest mixing cocaine with with a lot of prescription drugs that are mood altering is probably not a great recipe, right? You know what I mean? Like,
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think the best situation for what he could have done there would have been, you know what? Here is the number for one of my colleagues that I recommend. Go
yeah,
and speak with them. They can get you something and help you.
yes,
Not, you know what? Take these. You'll be fine.
it's
And then
not
she
great.
called and was like, I hate this. I'm not well. And he's like, and this was like 3 days before everything went down. It's just,
Yeah. I mean, again, I also do think ultimately the Pfizer lawsuit is fair. I mean, listen, any lawsuit, I guess, is fair in theory, but I think for me, it just stood out as I was hearing all of it that I was like, yeah, that psychiatrist is in the wrong here. Like
oh yeah,
he is culpable legally in a court of law. Because as you know, dear listeners, when we talk about these things on this show, I'm always much like I'm into the psychology, I'm also into the
Mhm.
courtroom stuff. And to me, I'm like, no, he violated his oath. He broke a rule. Like that is a completely valid lawsuit that it's like you can't be giving drugs to someone that isn't a patient, period.
100%.
Full stop. Um, and then of course the last thing I just wanted to comment on very quickly was this Andy Dick factor. And look,
No.
I had no idea about this feud with him and John Lovitz. I understand, obviously, John Lovitz, this is like his brother. So, look, if it were me and you and someone gave you cocaine and then you developed some sort of cocaine addiction and died,
Mhm,
like,
mhm.
yeah, I think I would probably have a vendetta also. So I'm not negating John Lovitz's feelings
Sure.
at all. I agree with what you said, though, that I think it's important to remember that this was someone who, if she was looking for cocaine, which she seemed to be, and we know she had a past and history with cocaine, she would have found cocaine. If you've bought cocaine before, you're going to be able to buy it again, you know? So,
Yeah.
and the unfortunate thing is that, listen, I never thought I'd come to Andy Dick's defense about anything, but he does have to live with this. He does have to live with that at the end of the day.
Yeah.
He worked with Phil Hartman on news radio. They were obviously some level of friendship or colleagues, and I'm sure that there must be a lot going on in that brain regarding that, which is also very sad. Again, I'm not defending his behavior at all, but if anything, I feel some compassion for the fact that that must be a tough crown to wear for the rest of your life,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
Christy Oxborrow, what fantastic research as always. You know, I think if anything, it was nice to have some laughs in this episode about someone who
Yeah.
was a comedic genius, even though their
Oh,
death was the most tragic possible.
yeah.
Um, and what a fun memory hearing all of those 90s SNL characters. This is making me want to revisit ASAP.
Yeah. Look, 90s SNL. Again, I could talk about it forever.
Yeah.
Um, but it helps, because I mean, especially when I mean, some of the episodes are harder than, others. All the episodes to a degree are difficult to get through, but especially when you're spending days and days, deep in it. But especially when it's someone you know and have been a fan of for more than half your life,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
it's tough. So it was tough, seeing interviews and hearing his voice, and it was tough. So I was like, we're gonna add, we're gonna sprinkle in a little bit, of things because, that's the way he would have done it. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. And we thank you, dear listeners, for joining us on this ride. If you haven't already, give us a follow on the socials on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at True Crime and Cocktails, on Twitter at Not Detectives. Again, if you'd like some bonus content, go over to patreon.com/True Crime and Cocktails to learn more about that over there. And of course, the only place for official True Crime and Cocktails merch is, of course, truecrewmerch.com. So check that out as well if you haven't already. Christy, do you want to tell the people about next week's episode?
on the next True Crime and Cocktails, Stacy Thorne.
Cannot wait to hear about this. Not a familiar case to me, and I can't wait to learn all of it from my best gal. Christy, do you want to say goodnight to the people?
Good night, Bobby Brink.
Good night, Tom Selleck.